people, and they'd all be arguing with me. And even if I had a debate with me and somebody else, the host would end up arguing against me. Right? Everybody thought that I was crazy, talking about this coming real estate bust, this Great Recession, the bankruptcy of General Motors or Freddie and Fannie. And of course, 2008 comes along, and a lot of the predictions I made started to come true. And what happened was a lot of people around the country started putting a lot of my television appearances on YouTube. And so there's this huge record of me going on there. And I developed a very big following around the world because of YouTube, I think. Because a lot of people were seeing this stuff, and they were saying, who is this guy? The one guy that's got it right. And so people were watching my stuff, and there was one particular video that I think a young kid put together. I had never even met him. I still haven't met him. He did call my radio show and introduce himself, but he made a video, Peter Schiff was right, and over 1.6 million people have seen that one particular video, which just was me arguing with a lot of other people on CNBC and on Fox News. But a lot of these young kids who had watched me started a movement about a year ago to draft me to run for the United States Senate. And part of it had to do with the fact that Chris Dodd was the incumbent, and he was the poster boy for the economic collapse. He was one of the key personalities that made it possible. He's the one that protected Freddie and Fannie. Anytime somebody tried to rein them in, he was there to make sure that didn't happen. And so it seemed like it would be a great matchup. The person who predicted the financial crisis versus the guy who helped cause it. And so they got me to run. They started raising money. They were sending me emails, and it took them about a year, but they convinced me to do it. And a few months ago, I entered the race. I think it was just a couple days after Linda McMahon announced her campaign. But I really was surprised by it. I wasn't planning on doing it, and so I didn't have an organization. I said, okay, I'm going to do it. But then I had to really start, putting the pieces together. And I've only recently finished, collecting my campaign team, which is now together. I opened my headquarters in Guilford probably about a month ago. And I haven't even sent out any, mailings to the state of Connecticut yet. I haven't done any commercials yet. All that stuff is coming. But I had to get some time to put everything together. But what really makes me different from, the other candidates that are in the race is not only do I have a good understanding of business from the perspective of an entrepreneur, because I've run a business my whole life, I've never worked in government. I've always worked in the private sector, so I know what it's like to run a business, and I know from firsthand experience all the things that the government does to hurt business, to undermine business. You see, a lot of people think that they want to go to Washington to create jobs. I don't want to go to Washington to create jobs. I want to go to Washington so I can stop Washington from destroying the jobs that we create, that individuals create, that entrepreneurs create. Government doesn't create anything. They don't have anything. All government can do is take from some people and give to somebody else, but in the process, they destroy wealth. So what I want to do, as far as helping the economy or helping to create jobs, is I want to remove all the impediments and all the roadblocks to entrepreneurs that Washington is putting in our way. I want to dramatically reduce regulations that make our businesses less competitive, and I want to lower taxes. But I recognize that we can only lower taxes if we cut spending. Meanwhile, federal budget, the government has almost doubled the amount of money it's spent in the last decade. We need to dramatically shrink government spending, and we need to shrink it right now. And I don't buy into this nonsense that, the economy is too weak. We need to spend money to stimulate the economy. That doesn't stimulate the economy. That suffocates the economy. That strangles the economy, because the bigger the government gets, the smaller the economy gets. So the only real economic stimulus is shrinking government. So I want to do the opposite of what they're doing right now. Right now the budget is $3.8 trillion. I'd like to have it. Right? It's at least back to where it was 10 years ago. And I thought the government was too big 10 years ago. Yet we'd have to cut it in half to get back to where we were in 2000. But how are we going to do that? We've got to cut government spending. Not just slow down the rate of increase, but actually reduce spending. Tell people that are getting checks from the government that you're going to get a smaller check, or you're not going to get any check at all. We've got to stop spending money because we don't have it. The country is broke. We're borrowing now at 60 cents for every dollar we collect in taxes. That is ridiculous. We're going to add $2 trillion to the national debt in the next year. $2 trillion in 1 year. And then what? What's it going to be after that? Where's all this money coming from? We don't have the money. We're borrowing it from China. We're borrowing it from Japan. They're going to stop lending because we can't pay it back. And then all we got is Ben Bernanke. who can print the money, but then it has no value. Then we're going to have a real crisis. So I have an understanding of business, but then I also have an understanding of economics. There are a lot of people that have run businesses, but it doesn't mean they know anything about economics. You can know something about your business, your particular business, which is fine. But that doesn't mean you understand economics. And I don't think being a congressman is like running a business. I mean, people think, well, I've been in business, so I have good experience for Congress. I don't think that's it at all. I think that what I'm going to need to be able to do in Congress is to be an effective leader, communicator, and educator, which is what I do, in the brokerage business, where I'm trying to educate my clients to do the right thing, not what they want to do, but what they need to do. Somebody needs to go to Washington and tell these clowns that they're responsible for our problems. And so far, all they've done is try to get reelected. Whenever they're confronted with a problem in Washington, the solution is, well, what can I do so everything is good, everything is better before the next election? They don't really care about solving long-term problems. All they care about is the problem of getting reelected. I need to go to Washington and convince 99 other senators that they shouldn't care about getting reelected, that the country is more important than their own political careers, that we are at a real crucial point in our history as a nation. We are about to go into a major, major economic crisis. What we had in 2008, that was not the crisis. What's about to hit us, maybe in 2011, that's going to be the crisis. Because ultimately, it's not a financial crisis, it's a currency crisis. Because of what we've done, right? Everything that we've done to try to solve the economic crisis has made it worse, right? We did the exact same thing that we did in 2002. We stimulated. When the housing bubble burst, the government should have done nothing. The government should have let housing prices fall, they should have let banks fail, they should have stood aside and let the market function. Instead, they stimulated the economy exactly the way they did it in 2002. But they're not stimulating the economy. They're stimulating the problems in the economy. They're creating more debt. They're creating more spending. They're preventing the market from solving and rebalancing our economy. Because the problem is, fundamentally, our economy is a mess. It's a mess because of reckless monetary and fiscal policy that has resulted in this misallocation of resources. The basic problem is we consume too much and we don't produce enough. So what has to happen? How do we solve this problem? Well, we have to consume less. That means Americans have to spend less. We have to buy fewer cars. We can't buy as many houses. We can't buy as many gadgets. And the government has to spend less. We need to save our money. We need to put money in the bank. We need to grow our savings. And if we do that, then businesses will have access to capital. Because capital comes from savings. And if we can start businesses, we can make stuff. We can produce things. We can create goods. We can provide jobs for people. And we can work our way out of debt. Because that's how you get out of debt. You can't spend your way out of debt. You can't borrow your way out of debt. You have to save your way out and you have to work your way out. That's what individuals have to do, and that's what nations have to do. Unfortunately, we're not doing that. All we're doing is postponing the pain, and because the government is not allowing the market to function, they are creating a much bigger problem. And of course, because of the rhetoric of the Bush administration, because people now associate the collapse of 2008 with a failure of capitalism, they think that somehow socialism is the answer. That we need to rein in the economy, that we need more regulation, because it was an absence of regulation that led to the crisis. And that is the exact opposite of what's true. It wasn't the market, it was government regulation that caused the crisis. That's why I was able to forecast it, because I understood how government policy was impacting the economy, how it was distorting rational decision-making, how it led to reckless speculation on Wall Street or reckless consumption on Main Street. So somebody has to go to Washington and change that, and get the other senators to understand what they've done and what they need to do now to make the situation right. And, a lot of people, are running as Republicans now, and they're jumping on the bandwagon of, let's shrink government. Where were these guys a few years ago, when government was growing like a cancer? The Republicans had control of the Senate. We had the White House for 8 years, and government kept growing. Government grew under Bush faster than it did under Lyndon Johnson. I mean, what kind of Republicans are that? So we need people that are actually going to walk the walk and not just talk the talk. The problem is a lot of people, they run as Republicans, but they're politicians, first and foremost. They know what they have to say to get our votes, but the minute they get elected, they check their principles at the door, and they expand government. Because expanding government is how they stay in power. They get to Washington, they like Washington, they want to be in Washington, and so they know what they have to do. That's not why I'm going. I don't want to go to Washington. I don't particularly like it over there. And it's a pain, it's a hassle. I'm going to have to commute every week because my kid lives here. I can't move to Washington. And I have a good job in the private sector. It's not that I want to be in the Senate. The problem is I have to be in the Senate because there's no one else that's going to go there that I think that's going to do what needs to be done. We need to send somebody to Washington who's not going there because they want to be there, but because they think they have to be there because the country is in trouble. And that's why I'm running. And I know in the past, you guys, you get Republican candidates, and a lot of times you vote for them because you figure they're not as bad as a Democrat. So you're really voting for the lesser of two evils. That's not going to be the case with me. If I